Live below your means. Save for a rainy day. Pay off all your debt. Max out your 401k. Buy a house as soon as possible. Cut the lattes and avocado toast. You've heard it all. Your parents said it. Your coworkers say it. Every personal finance guru on the internet says it. And it sounds so smart, so responsible, so safe. But what if this so-called expert advice is exactly what's keeping you stuck in Averageville? What if following the rules is why you're still grinding, still stressed about money, still watching your savings barely move while the cost of everything keeps climbing? Today, I'm going to debunk 5 pieces of financial gospel that trap millions of Americans in mediocrity. I'll show you the math that proves why this advice fails, and I'll give you better paths forward. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The top 1% of Americans own 31% of all wealth in this country. The bottom 50%, they own 2.5% combined. And both groups heard the same advice growing up. The difference is what they actually did with their money. If you're tired of the rat race, this is your exit ramp. Let's go. Bad advice number 1. Just save more in a bank account. This is the foundation of conventional wisdom. Put money in savings, watch it grow, sleep well at night knowing it's safe. Sounds perfect, right? Here's the problem. The FDIC reports the average savings account pays 0.39% APY. Some big banks like Chase and Bank of America pay 0.01%. That's not a typo. 1/100th of 1%. Meanwhile, inflation is running at 2.7%, which means your money is losing over 2% of its purchasing power every single year just sitting there being safe. Let me do the math. You put $10,000 in a traditional savings account. 10 years later, you have about $10,400. Congratulations, you made $400 in a decade. But here's the part they don't tell you. After adjusting for inflation, that money only buys what $7,900 would have bought when you started. You lost over $2,000 in real purchasing power by doing exactly what they told you to do. Now let's say you invested that same $10,000 in an S&P 500 index fund averaging 7% returns. 10 years later, $20,000. If you caught the recent 10-year average of 12%, over $31,000. The difference between following conventional advice and what wealthy people actually do is over $20,000 on just 10 grand. And here's what makes this even worse. 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Many of them have savings accounts they're desperately trying to build. And every year, inflation eats away at whatever they manage to save. Meanwhile, the top 10% owns 93% of all stocks in America. They're not losing money to inflation. They're compounding wealth while everyone else watches their purchasing power shrink. The alternative? High-yield savings accounts now pay 4 to 5%, which at least keeps pace with inflation for your emergency fund. But beyond that, open a Roth IRA. Start with $100 a month in low-cost index funds. Your future self will thank you. Bad advice number 2. Avoid all debt like the plague. This one sounds so responsible. Debt is bad. Pay everything in cash, never owe anyone anything. And for credit card debt at 21% interest? Absolutely. Pay that off immediately. But blanket debt avoidance ignores a crucial truth. Not all debt is created equal. Here's the math that changed my perspective. Let's say you rent an apartment for $1,500 a month. Over 30 years, you'll pay $540,000. Actually, with typical 3% annual rent increases, it's closer to $870,000. And at the end, you own nothing. Now let's say instead you buy a $400,000 home with a 6% mortgage. Your total payments over 30 years are about $720,000. More than the rent, right? But here's the difference. At the end, you own an asset. With historical home appreciation of 4% annually, that house is now worth over $1.3 million. The renter paid more and owns nothing. The homeowner used debt as leverage and built over $1 million in wealth. This is how the wealthy think about money. Debt under 6 or 7% that builds equity in an appreciating asset isn't a burden, it's a tool. Student loans that lead to higher earnings, that's leverage. A mortgage on a reasonably priced home, that's forced savings plus appreciation. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Not everyone gets the same interest rates. And you're right. Credit disparities mean some families pay 2 to 3 percentage points more for the same loans. That's real, and that's unfair. But even with those headwinds, strategic debt often beats lifetime renting. The key is calculating the ROI before you borrow, not avoiding debt entirely out of fear. The alternative? Use debt strategically. Look into FHA loans with 3.5% down. Consider house hacking, where you rent out rooms to cover your mortgage. Run the numbers on rent versus buy for your specific situation. The goal isn't zero debt, it's smart debt. Bad advice number 3. Max out your 401k blindly. Now, before you come for me in the comments, I'm not saying don't contribute to your 401k. I'm saying contribute intelligently, because conventional wisdom leaves out some crucial details. First, fees. The average 401k charges 0.52% in fees. That sounds tiny until you do the math. On a $500,000 portfolio over 30 years, the difference between paying 0.1% in a low-cost index fund versus 1% in a typical actively managed fund is over $700,000. That's not a typo. Over 700 grand vanishes to fees. And here's the kicker. 88% of actively managed funds underperform basic index funds anyway. You're paying more for worse results. Second, the employer match myth. Everyone says get the free money. And yes, if your employer matches, contribute at least enough to get the full match. But here's what they don't mention. 56% of 401k plans have vesting schedules up to 6 years. If you leave before you're fully vested, you forfeit part or all of that match. Here's the problem. The median job tenure in America is now just 3.9 years, the lowest since 2002. If you're at a company for 3 years with a 6-year graded vesting schedule, you're only 40% vested. You leave, and 60% of those matches disappear. One study found that 1.8 million workers forfeited $1.5 billion in employer matches in a single year. That free money? It comes with strings. And this hits certain workers harder. If you're in a field with high turnover, if you're gig economy, if you're more likely to change jobs due to workplace issues, you're more likely to lose those matches while still having contributed your own money to a high-fee account. The alternative? Contribute enough to get any immediate match. Then prioritize a Roth IRA where you control the investments and fees. The 2025 limit is $7,000. Use low-cost index funds with expense ratios under 0.1%. Use free tools like Vanguard's Fee Analyzer to see what your 401k is actually costing you. And if your employer plan has terrible options, push back or build wealth outside of it. Bad advice number 4. Buy a house as soon as possible because it's always a good investment. The American dream, right? Home ownership equals success. And for many people, buying a home is the right move. But buy as soon as possible? That's how people end up house poor. Here are the numbers nobody mentions. The National Association of Home Builders found that a typical family now needs to spend 38% of their income on mortgage payments for a median-priced new home. That's way above the recommended 28%. One-third of American households, that's 42.5 million families, are cost-burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of income on housing. And the purchase price is just the beginning. Annual maintenance runs 1 to 4% of home value. On a $400,000 house, that's $4,000 to $16,000 a year. Older homes can hit 8%. Property taxes average over $4,000 nationally and nearly $10,000 in New Jersey. Insurance keeps climbing, HOA fees, repairs. Here's a scenario. You buy a $400,000 home with 20% down at 6% interest. Your monthly payment is about $1,900. Add property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, you're at $2,500 or more. That's $30,000 a year minimum. If home prices drop just 10%, you're underwater $40,000. If you need to sell during a downturn, you could lose your entire down payment plus more. Now compare that to waiting 2 or 3 years, investing your down payment in the market, and buying when you're truly ready. That $80,000 down payment invested at 8% for 3 years becomes over $100,000. You just made 20 grand by being patient. The alternative? Run rent versus buy calculators for your specific market. The break-even point is now 5 to 11 years in most areas. If you might move before then, renting could be smarter. Consider house hacking to offset costs. Look into REITs for real estate exposure without the headaches. Real estate investment trusts have returned nearly 10% annually over 25 years, with zero maintenance and instant liquidity. Bad advice number 5. Budget every penny and cut out all luxuries. The latte factor. You've heard this a million times. Stop buying $5 coffees and you'll be rich. Just sacrifice more, cut more, deprive yourself into wealth. Let's run the actual math. A $5 daily coffee equals $1,825 a year. Invested at 7% for 40 years, that becomes about $360,000. Sounds impressive until you compare it to the alternative. Harvard's program on negotiation calculated that a $5,000 increase in starting salary compounded over a 40-year career with typical raises adds over $634,000 to lifetime earnings. One negotiation, one conversation. Nearly double the impact of 40 years of skipping coffee every single day. Here's the devastating stat. 50% of men don't negotiate their salary. 61% of women don't. Yet 85% of people who negotiate get at least some increase. 70% of hiring managers expect candidates to negotiate. They've already budgeted for it. You're literally leaving money on the table. And job hopping? During the Great Resignation, job switchers saw 15% or higher pay increases compared to 7 or 8% for those who stayed. Even now, 80% of job hoppers increased their salary over 5 years, with 20% gaining $50,000 or more. So what has more impact? Cutting $200 a month in small expenses, which saves $2,400 a year, or focusing on a 10% raise on a $60,000 salary, which adds $6,000 a year. That's 2.5 times the impact with a single conversation instead of daily deprivation. And here's the subtle part nobody mentions. The cut expenses advice assumes everyone has excess to cut. It assumes equal pay for equal work. It assumes stable employment. For families already stretched thin, for workers facing wage gaps, for anyone dealing with systemic headwinds, there's often nothing left to cut. But there's always room to negotiate, upskill, and grow income. The alternative? Apply the 80-20 rule. 80% of your financial progress comes from big decisions: housing, cars, career, income growth, salary negotiation. Focus there first. Track your net worth, not every expense. Build a small fund so you don't burn out from constant sacrifice. Sustainable beats extreme every time. Let me zoom out for a second and tell you why all this matters. Every piece of advice I just debunked has good intentions. Save money, avoid bad debt, plan for retirement, own a home, be responsible with spending. Nothing wrong with any of that in theory. But these rules were written for a different economy. They assume wages keep up with inflation. They don't. They assume home prices are affordable. The median home costs over $400,000 now. They assume everyone gets the same interest rates and loan terms. They don't. They assume job stability and pension-like retirement. Those barely exist anymore. The top 10% hold 70% of all wealth in America. They didn't get there by parking money in savings accounts and cutting lattes. They invested. They used leverage. They minimized fees. They focused on income growth. They played offense, not defense. Conventional advice keeps you playing defense. It keeps you safe. And safe in an economy with growing inequality and shrinking middle class means slowly falling behind. Here's what I want you to do. First, audit your savings. If your money is earning less than inflation, move it. High-yield savings for emergencies. Index funds for growth. Stop letting banks profit off your caution. Second, reframe debt. Calculate the actual ROI on any borrowing. Good debt that builds equity can accelerate wealth. Bad debt at 20% interest destroys it. Know the difference. Third, check your 401k fees. Use the free fee analyzers online. If your plan charges more than 0.5%, push back or invest elsewhere first. Fourth, run the rent versus buy numbers for your situation, not the national averages, your city, your career stability, your timeline. And fifth, shift from expense cutting to income growing. Negotiate your salary. Build skills that command higher pay. Your earning potential is unlimited. Your expenses can only go to zero. Drop a comment with the worst financial advice you ever followed. I want to hear your stories. And if this video opened your eyes, hit subscribe. I post new videos every week breaking down the financial systems designed to keep us average and showing you how to break free from them. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because average isn't inevitable. It's a choice. Let's choose differently.